Daniel opens the door and freezes. Leo is laughing. First time in 2 years. Keys slip from his hand, clatter on the hall tiles, and the fragile sound folds away like a bird startled from a branch. The flat forgets how to breathe. Grace steadies the tray and doesn't move a muscle. Rain is stitched so fine across the estate it looks like mist. The stairwell smells of damp coats and detergent. From somewhere, a radio mutters the travel news. Grace Carter nudges the door with her shoulder, balancing a tray and a cloth tin. New shift, new address. She clocks the small things the way carers do, the mop stored upright, the bin liners doubled, the way someone has wiped the skirting boards but missed the socket plates. Leo's wheelchair is turned a fraction towards the window as if he'd been watching the wet light and grew tired halfway. He's smaller than the chair makes him seem. His hands rest like leaves. His eyes sit deep and steady. The kite on the curtain rail faded, cross brace slightly bent. Looks like it tried for the sky and learned to live with a view. "Morning," Grace says, soft enough not to tap the glass of the moment. She checks the footplates, smooths the blanket, and dials her voice to the kind that makes space. On the table, she lays out breakfast porridge thinned to soupy, 2 slices of banana, a thimble of water naming each item as if they're guests to be introduced. Then she begins the tiny theater. The sponge hops onto the duster like a hat that's lost its patience. "Absolutely not," says the duster in a voice with far too much dignity for yellow feathers. The rubber glove appointed reluctantly as Crown tilts and declares, "Order, please." Leo's eyes hook to movement more than sound. Grace learned that with other children and has not forgotten. So she lets the cloth draw a bright crescent across the tray, slow, sure, returning to the start as if a tide were rehearsing. A tremor shapes itself in Leo's throat. It is so small that Grace's training fights her hope. Name nothing, push nothing, let it come. She circles the cloth again. The sound steps closer, a fine thread in the air. Leo's mouth lifts at one corner. Not a smile. Not yet. And then like a window unlatching, there it is. A laugh, thin but clean. The sound of a hinge remembering how to turn. The front door opens. Daniel Reed is wet to the elbows, hair blown out of its parting. He takes in the scene, his son's face, the woman he did not expect, the theater of cloth and sponge, and the keys leap from his fingers as if they want the floor. The clatter is a hammer to glass. Leo flinches, shoulders rolling in. The laugh collapses the way a tent drops when the pole is kicked. "Who are you? What are you doing with my son?" Daniel's voice is asking 2 different questions and answering neither. Grace sets the cloth down without a squeak. "Grace Carter," she says, showing her badge as if it could settle the weather. "Agency sent me. Cleaning and care." "Nobody told me." He hears the edge in his own voice and hates it, but can't file it down fast enough. His eyes keep going back to Leo like he's afraid looking away will erase what he saw. "You must be careful. He's fragile." Grace glances at Leo and thinks lonely, not fragile. But she says only, "Of course," and adjusts the chair by 2 careful centimeters so Leo can see both of them without effort. She resets the tray. The room loosens its shoulders by a breath. The morning arrives with that thin light Bromley does so well, rain gone. Everything rinsed but not clean. Daniel leaves the door on the latch and tells himself it's because the postie is unreliable. From his study window he can see the garden. Wet paving, a fox print smudged on the step, plant pots that have known better summers. Grace works in the border with sleeves pushed up. She talks while she works the kind of nonsense that's really a rope thrown across a gap. At the rose bush, she makes her voice low and grand. "I will be looked at," says the rose, with scandalous self-regard. At the daisies, she is a whisper. "I would like to be looked at too," the daisy says, "but I'm not sure how." The broom becomes a soldier with a ridiculous march. The spray bottle, a conductor that can't keep time. Leo watches as if a window has been cracked open somewhere inside him. There's focus without strain, attention without fear. His hands hover, then tap one, two palms soft against each other like rain beginning. Daniel's breath misfires. He stands back from the glass as if he's eavesdropping on a sacred thing. He hadn't noticed when he stopped trying because it hurt too much to fail. The thought lands with shame and relief braided together. Grace brings Leo back inside before weather or luck can turn. On the terrace, Daniel manages something like ordinary. He's not easy with food, he says, aiming at the practical because it's safer than the miraculous. Could I make him something? Grace asks, meeting Leo's eye line instead of Daniel's. Small but different. Daniel hears himself giving permission with the very posture of a man who expects to be disappointed. Go on, then. Grace returns an hour later with a plate that looks like it would apologize for itself if plates could. Sandwiches cut into butterfly shapes, white slices and wholemeal halves, cream cheese thin as paint, lettuce leaves as wings, cherry tomatoes split for bright little antennae. She sets it down as if presenting a guest, not a trick. Look, Leo, she says, keeping her voice full of air but not empty of respect. Butterflies have come to lunch. Leo examines the plate the way you look at something you do not trust yet. His eyes hop left, then right, and catch the tiny red of the tomatoes. His hands lift and fall without landing. Grace does not hurry the air. She shifts her position by a palm's width until he does not have to choose between plate and face. Behind her, Daniel makes himself smaller in the doorway so the scene won't notice him. He runs through the familiar defeat in advance refusal, turn of the head, lips locked, the slow panic, and is almost surprised to find that the script in his chest is not being followed. Leo reaches. The hand is bird-like and precise. It finds a wholemeal wing and brings it to his mouth. A nibble. A chew that is cautious and then committed. A second bite that belongs to a different child than the first. Daniel feels his shout rise and clamps it in his teeth. The sound he swallows is jagged and wild with relief. He looks at Grace as if she did something impossible with ordinary tools. She keeps her eyes on Leo, and when he finishes the small butterfly, she slides the plate a fraction so he can choose again without feeling urged. When the plate is a tilted arrangement of crumbs and proud little tomato halos, Grace wipes the corners of Leo's mouth with a gentleness that contains no triumph. Well done, she says, making the words a place to stand, not a banner to wave. We'll do more tomorrow if you like. As she puts the tray away, she moves through the kitchen like someone tidying a stage after a show that mattered. Daniel wants to say a dozen things. Thank you, sorry how I didn't know I could feel this and not break, but what comes out is the plainest one. Stay for a cuppa? I'd better head, Grace says. Back in the morning. She crouches to Leo's eye level, the position that refuses to speak down. Tomorrow we play more, yes? The boy's chin lifts once, careful and clear. A nod with the weight of a contract. Grace is gone a minute later, the corridor swallowing her steps. The flat gathers itself. In the window, the faded kite moves a fraction as the air changes. Daniel picks up the dropped keys from yesterday and sets them on the hall table as if not dropping them is a promise he can make. He goes to the sitting room and sits with Leo in the new quiet one that is not empty. Not anymore. He almost doesn't recognize the sound at first. It is domestic, unglamorous, the kind you would step over if you weren't looking. It is hope, moving about the house as if it belongs here. By the third morning, the flat seems to expect her. Daniel leaves the door on the latch and the kettle waiting with just enough water for 2 mugs. The hallway smells of damp coats and washing powder. Somewhere a neighbor's Hoover drones and stops. Leo is angled towards the window, blanket straight, hair brushed the way Daniel used to do when there were school runs and packed lunches. Grace keeps the frame exactly the same because repetition is a bridge, and you don't jump on bridges while they're being built. Chair breaks on. Footplates checked. The tray wiped in a slow circle that glints and says, "We're beginning now." Then the tiny theater starts. Not bigger, only steadier. The washing up glove returns, now promoted to a crown that keeps slipping over one ear. The feather duster is a knight with opinions. The sponge, demoted and furious, attempts a revolt and is sent to peel pretend potatoes with great dignity. Leo's eyes anchor to movement, then to timing. When Grace lifts an eyebrow, his fingers rise a breath from the armrest. When she lets the duster strut, his wrist tilts left, right barely a sway, and yet it is a sway. Breath in, breath out. The room begins to hum with a pattern that feels friendly to his bones. Daniel lingers in the doorway with a laptop he hasn't opened. He has learned the art of very small nods because anything louder makes the air brittle. On the table, the laminated notes sit where they always sit, but they are starting to feel like a story that forgot to update itself. Grace hums first to test what the room will accept. When nothing cracks, she slides her phone onto the counter and chooses a song that moves like a steady hand on a back, no drums that jab, no lyrics that crowd. A low pulse. A soft piano. She circles Leo's chair, never rushing, never coming at him from behind, letting him see her trajectory so his body can prepare before he's asked to meet it. "Permission to dance, Your Majesty?" she says to the single rose in the vase, dropping into a pompous contralto that makes its own eyebrows. To the daisy pot on the sill, she is almost not a voice at all. "You can watch, love. Watching counts." Leo's fingers open and close in time with something outside of himself. First the music, then Grace's turn, then both. The faded kite on the curtain rail shifts a fraction in the draft and becomes part of the choreography. A tired pennant, nodding in approval. Grace widens the circle by a handspan. Leo answers with two soft claps that sound like rain remembering a shed roof. Daniel says, "Careful," and hates himself for it. Then hears Grace's "I know," without rebuke, and breathes again. She never over-celebrates. No whoops, no rush. Just a murmured, "That's it," shaped like a place to rest a foot. She wheels the chair a quarter turn so Leo can watch her pass the window. There is a pleasure in the repeatable, in predicting and being right. Past the sink, past the fridge magnet that never holds anything, past the corner where the skirting board needs paint, and back again. Leo's head follows. His hands float at the edge of clapping and decide to be brave. 1, 2. A pause. 1. The rhythm isn't neat, but it's his. After the song ends, Grace doesn't rush to fill the quiet. She kneels so Leo doesn't need to tilt or strain to find her face. The tray sits between them like a small stage. "Shall we tell them about the garden?" she asks, as if the flowers are old friends who missed the show. She points to the rose and gives it that outrageous voice again. "I will be looked at," says the rose, "all day if possible, and even when people are trying to do the washing up." She strokes a daisy petal with one knuckle. "I would like to be looked at too," the daisy says, "but I don't quite know where to put my face." Leo watches her mouth as much as he listens to sound. Grace slows the shapes of words the way you slow steps for someone learning stairs. M closing and opening like a soft door. A clear space. Again. M.A. Not a lesson, not an ask, just two pieces offered to the air. His lips answer. "Ma." It is a breath wearing a coat it hasn't grown into yet. Grace does not gasp or glance at Daniel. She nods the smallest nod on earth, the kind a diver makes to the water. "If you like," she says, which is another way of saying you're not in trouble if you don't. "Ma." The second try sits on the first like a sparrow joining a sparrow on a line. Daniel's hand finds the doorframe and holds. He doesn't bless the moment with words in case the weight of language is too much for it. He remembers the last time his son made that sound. What year was it? What shirt was he wearing? And feels grief and gratitude stand up at the same time inside his chest. Grace doesn't chase a third attempt. She taps the tray twice. Gentle punctuation. Enough for today. She wipes the corner of Leo's mouth as if the sound might have left a crumb there. Then, casual as rain, lunch in a bit. Shall we invite the butterflies again? Leo's eyes drop to the table, then lift back to hers. A small, definite nod. Promise accepted. Bridge open. Grace sets about the kitchen the way people tidy a church after a service, practical, careful, never poking at the holy bits. Daniel makes tea because doing something with his hands feels like not wasting the day. He wants to ask how she did it, as if there were a lever hidden in a cupboard he has failed to find for 2 years. She wouldn't tell him even if there were. It isn't a lever. It's 1,000 habits done kindly. When she leaves that afternoon, the stairwell's damp smell comes with her and then doesn't. Daniel stands at the window with Leo and watches the estate breathe. A postie's trolley squeaks, a double-decker hums at the far road, a neighbor shakes crumbs from a tablecloth into air that has seen worse. He presses his palm to the glass to feel the world outside being solid. Behind him, the laminated notes lean against the microwave like old advice. He doesn't throw them away. He just doesn't look at them as much. Tomorrow, then, he says, not to anyone in particular. Leo's fingers open and close in what might be agreement, or might be the body testing a new permission. Daniel closes the door gently that night, as if noise has consequences beyond hearing. In the sitting room, the kite's bent cross casts a thin shadow that trembles when the heating clicks on. He sits with it until the shadow stills. Tomorrow, at the same hour, the house will hold its breath again, and try not to make a big deal of the miracle it is hoping for. By midweek, the flat knows the hour. Daniel leaves the door on the latch. The kettle hums its way towards a cuppa. Neither of them will finish. Grace eases Leo to the same patch of mild light by the window, brakes on, footplates checked, blanket straightened. The ritual begins. Small theaters, steady circles, a room that keeps time with a child rather than a clock. Across the courtyard, a net curtain twitches. Not the big, careless sway of a draft, this is the neat pinch of 2 fingers taking a look. It closes an instant too late when Grace glances up, the way a child pretends a game hasn't started yet. She says nothing. She has learned that naming a thing before you know it only makes it louder. The next morning, the same window resets with a precise triangle of space at its edge. The morning after that, a shadow slips along the upstairs landing, stops, then draws back as if footsteps are being measured against creaking floorboards. When Grace wheels Leo away from the glass, the triangle of space disappears as though it never existed. Daniel collects the noises that don't frighten hope, the spoon set down without clatter, the soft two-clap that Leo has made his own, the quiet that might be breath and might be the rehearsal of a letter. He speaks under the moment, never on top of it. That was good. There. Did you see? Sometimes he isn't sure whom he's asking, Grace or himself. Grace keeps the orbit gentle. She narrates the ordinary with exactly enough color to make it vivid and no more. The rose is impossible today, she murmurs, strolling the duster past the vase. The daisy says that's fine. She'll practice being brave where nobody can see her. Leo tracks the movement. His hands open and close like small umbrellas testing the rain. On the landing outside the flat, a step pauses, then retreats. In the stairwell, damp and detergent make a smell that sits in the throat. Grace takes the recycling down and comes back with the sense of having been to a place where someone decided not to be seen. Bromley does its midweek business around them. A double-decker pushes air along the far road. A postie's trolley squeals and is soothed with a squirt of something from a pocket. A neighbor shakes crumbs from a tea towel into air that has put up with worse. In the grass strip by the bins, a dog noses a chip carton with pious concentration. Grace anchors the day with small proofs. Leo's gaze held for a count of 5, his mouth softening at the edges when the Daisy voice whispers, Daniel remembering to breathe through the moment rather than over it. The laminated notes against the microwave are starting to feel like a version of the family that has fallen behind the one in the room. When Grace takes Leo a fraction nearer the window, the faded kite's bent cross shows in the glass, and somehow that, too, becomes part of the routine. Leo's eyes bump against it and return to her. The passback grows clean, like a ball finding a rhythm on a wall that has learned to give. The 6th morning behaves itself. Leo tracks, claps, rests. Daniel stands in the doorway with his arms unfolded for the first time in months. Same time tomorrow, he says, trying the sentence on for size. Same time, Grace answers, as if making the promise aloud could help it hold. On the 7th day, the rain clears early and light comes in with a thin, truthful edge. Grace is mid-circle on the tray when the upstairs window opens and closes again fast, like a thought changing its mind. The shadow on the landing is a fraction bolder. The careful feet on the stairs test each tread, seeking the quiet spots that locals know. The doorbell does not ring. Instead, there is a knock pitched to sound like it belongs here, not loud, not timid, just sure of the door it has chosen. Daniel looks up, surprised at the hour. Grace stills the cloth without finishing the circle, because leaving something mid-air makes less noise than putting it down. Leo has already turned his attention to the hallway, eyes bright in a way Grace has not seen on other mornings. The knock comes again, the same shape and weight as the first. Daniel crosses the hall. His hand is on the handle before he has decided what to say. The latch clicks. The door begins to open. The latch clicks. Daniel draws the door open and takes half a step back without meaning to. A woman stands on the mat with rain bright in her hair. For a breath, Grace thinks the weather has rearranged the house. The set of the mouth, the line of the cheek, the way the eyes take in the room as if it belongs to them. She has seen this face in the photo on the sideboard, only softer, only kind. Charlotte, Daniel says, the name remembering itself. You should have rung. I did, she answers lightly, already inside with the sort of ease that has a history. Twice last week. I thought I'd pop round. Her coat finds a hook without needing to be shown which one. Grace is still by the tray, cloth paused mid-circle. Leo has turned to the doorway. For a second, something like hope flares, recognition shaped like relief, and then it blows itself out. His shoulders fold, his hands retreat into the blanket as if tucking themselves away. The small rhythm they'd made together leaves the room without closing the door. Charlotte crosses to Leo with a smile that knows exactly how to arrange itself. Darling, she says, crouching, her voice an echo from an older life. Look at you. The words are right. The room around them isn't. Leo's eyes slip past her to the window where the faded kite sits very still. This is Grace, Daniel says, remembering his manners a beat late. Agency carer. Charlotte turns the smile on Grace friendly, practiced, measuring. Wonderful. Must be a relief for you, Dan. Having help. Her gaze does a neat tour of the counters, the laminated notes, the rinsed mugs, and returns without having found anything to forgive. Grace offers her name again, the way people do when a thing hasn't landed. I'm here mornings, she says. Only that. No claims, no defense. She straightens the tray not because it needs straightening, but because stable objects help when the air has gone wobbly. Charlotte perches on the arm of the sofa as if the sofa had asked her to. How's he really doing? She asks Daniel, voice softened for honesty. You know you can tell me. Daniel starts to explain the small, careful progress, the clapping, the watching, the better lunch, then hears himself and makes it smaller, as if protecting it by shrinking it. He's had some good mornings. Charlotte nods like a nurse in a memory. Good. But we mustn't push, must we? He's fragile. The word lands in the exact spot Daniel has been trying to empty of it. Grace keeps her expression quiet. She hears the line as if she has heard it before, in other kitchens where love had started to sound like fear that needed a reason. Of course, Daniel says, almost grateful for a rule he can hold. He looks at Leo, who is studying the tray as if it has become complicated. Boundaries, Charlotte says easily, as though each letter were padded. For everyone's sake. Grace tries the gentlest version of the theater, because sometimes routine can talk a room back to itself. The duster does a single pompous step. The sponge remembers how to be ridiculous without making a scene. She keeps distance, keeps the circle small. Leo doesn't meet it. His fingers, earlier as brave as a fledgling bird, stay tucked. When the duster pauses for permission, an old joke between them, he doesn't give it. His gaze skims the window, the kite, the door. The thread of sound they'd found on yesterday's breath does not show its face. Maybe that's enough for now, Charlotte suggests, like someone protecting a child from the excitement that other people cause. She smiles at Grace to soften the instruction so it won't look like one. Grace nods, because the rule in houses that aren't yours is simple. You do the work, and you don't make the weather worse. Daniel brings tea he won't drink. He stands in the wrong place for his own living room and can't quite work out how to move. Charlotte fills the space with anecdotes that have the shine of being told more than once, neighbors bumped into, old photos discovered, a recipe their mum used to do before everything went mad. Leo's eyes slide off them as if they were polished. Do ring me if you need anything, Charlotte says at the door, coat already buttoned, goodbye already sounding like hello in waiting. I'll try to be around more, it can't be easy. It isn't, Daniel says, and means it as relief and confession. She squeezes his arm as if closing a deal. Grace wipes the tray once more after she's gone. The circle is smooth, the cloth quiet. The quiet isn't the good kind. Leo's hands rest under the blanket, not hiding exactly, just not offering. When Grace steps out into the stairwell, the air smells of damp and perfume layered faintly on it. She tells herself perfume is just perfume. On the landing, the net curtain across the courtyard settles back as if a decision has been made elsewhere. Inside, Daniel stands with his palm on the back of Leo's chair like a man steadying a boat he doesn't trust the water with. Same time tomorrow? He asks, more question than arrangement. Same time? Grace says, and holds his gaze long enough to make the sentence feel like it can carry weight. Down on the estate, the rain has gone light. A double-decker noses the corner. A fox finds its afternoon route along the fence. In the window, the faded kite does not move at all. Charlotte begins to arrive at times that are almost convenient. Late morning when Daniel is between calls. Early afternoon when the school would have been out, once upon a time. She brings things that make themselves at home biscuits in a tin that doesn't match the others, a throw for the sofa folded with practiced hands, a photo in a silver frame that shows a summer none of them live in anymore. Just thought I'd brighten the place, she says, letting brightness decide what it means. Grace adjusts the tray and keeps the routine steady. Leo's eyes find her. His hands hover at the edge of a clap that doesn't quite land when Charlotte is in the room. Daniel tries to believe in both women at once and discovers that belief is a tug-of-war when trust is thin. Charlotte crouches by Leo's chair with a smile that has been to finishing school. Darling, you're safe, she says, smoothing the blanket. We're all doing our best, aren't we? But you mustn't tire yourself. We don't want episodes. The pause is small and polished. A person could skewer a meaning on it and not leave a mark. To Daniel in the kitchen, her tone is sisterly, useful. She's sweet, Charlotte says of Grace. But you do see how attached she's getting. It happens. They blur boundaries. It's not fair on him. Daniel, whose heart is not a tidy place, nods because the sentence gives him something to hold that isn't fear. He looks towards the sitting room and says nothing that would be brave enough to make a mess. On a gray noon, while Daniel searches an inbox that behaves like weather, Charlotte wheels the chair the smallest fraction towards the hall. Grace is at the sink rinsing a cloth. The tap hisses. The stairwell breathes through the letterbox. Charlotte leans so Leo can see only her face. Her voice is quiet, close, made of cotton. "You remember what happened?" she says. "You remember, don't you?" She doesn't wait for a nod. "It was awful. It broke everyone. Some things we keep inside because saying them makes people leave. You wouldn't want Daddy to leave, would you?" Leo's hands retreat into the blanket. The room shrinks around the word leave until even breathing sounds like a risk. Charlotte pats his knee once, with the finality of a stamp on a form, and rolls him back to the safe angle. When Grace turns, Charlotte is smiling at the window. "He loves the light," she says, as if the light had asked for a reference. "Boundaries," Charlotte repeats, as if the word were lavender to be tucked in a drawer. "You mustn't let her overstimulate him, Dan. Poor thing gets so wound up." Grace, who has kept her voice soft and her circles measured, becomes the person who might be doing too much simply because someone has offered the idea often enough to be useful. When Grace suggests a short song to anchor the day, Charlotte is ready. "Not today," she says brightly. "He's overtired." When Grace asks Leo whether the butterflies should visit at lunch, Charlotte answers for him with a laugh that borrows authority. "He's gone off sandwiches, haven't you, love?" Daniel hears the reasonableness and swallows his doubt like a pill that doesn't dissolve. A week that has found ways to be longer than a week, Charlotte arrives with a folder that looks obedient. "I spoke to someone," she tells Daniel, lowering her voice for legitimacy. "A specialist friend. She says over-engagement is a risk at this stage. We must protect him from well-intentioned intensity." The phrase places Grace gently on a shelf marked problem while allowing Charlotte to dust her hands of malice. There is an email printed out, names and titles that don't quite introduce themselves, recommendations that are really instructions. Daniel recognizes the temptation of being told what to do by paper. He has been drowning in the kind of not knowing that comes with loving a child you cannot reach. A page with lines on it is a boat, even if it leaks. "Perhaps," he says, careful, "we try fewer stories for a bit." He hates himself for it as he says it. He watches Grace hear the sentence and refuse to flinch. "Whatever keeps Leo steady," Grace replies. It isn't surrender. It's the tone of someone who will not fight a war in a kitchen when a boy is listening. Leo's tray is sometimes reset when Grace isn't looking, spoon a little too far, cup just off his natural reach, the kind of mischief that can be blamed on tidying. When Grace smooths the blanket, she finds the edges already smoothed and the corners too tight. When she moves to kneel in Leo's eye line, Charlotte is there first with a poised half-crouch and a voice that fills the space reserved for trying. Grace does not compete. The work won't survive it. She waits. Steadies, looks for the square inch of ground still theirs, the slow circle on the tray, the breath counted without numbers, the daisy voice that knows how to make room. Leo's eyes move to her and then away, like a tide deciding whether to return. His hands hover in that cove between clapping and hiding. The lesson is landing. Do not speak. Not because silence is good, but because words have consequences in this house that has learned to be nervous of itself. "I don't want him hurt," Daniel says one evening, looking at the kettle as if it could pick a side. "You won't," Charlotte answers, swift, helpful. "That's why you must be firm. Sweet little stories and dances fine in their place, but Leo needs calm." Grace dries her hands and chooses the sentence that leaves space. "Progress isn't always noisy," she says. What we've been doing is giving him safe chances to try. Charlotte smiles as if she has just been proved right. Exactly. Too many chances can feel like pressure. Daniel's shoulders sag with the weight of being told two good things that hate each other. He chooses the one that promises less pain if he is wrong. Let's keep it quiet then, he says, and the quiet that follows is not the good kind. Leo drifts through the next morning like a boy learning to make himself small. When Grace puts the duster into its pompous voice, he does not meet it. When she offers the rose its ridiculous lines, he watches the window instead, as if the kite has something to say that people won't let it. Charlotte arrives with new softness. Darling, we don't have to perform, she tells him, making the word sound like a threat someone else invented. People get tired of children who perform. She smooths the blanket that has been smooth for 10 minutes. In the kitchen, she lowers her voice to Daniel. You see how anxious he gets when she starts? He's unsettled afterwards. The lie wears enough truth to walk around without tripping. Daniel nods because nodding is easier than interrogating the space between two sentences when you're already tired. There is a version of this day in which someone slams a door and the story becomes about that. Grace will not give Charlotte that story. She keeps the pace even, thanks Daniel for the mug of tea he cannot drink, and leaves the house tidier than she found it in ways nobody notices until something goes wrong, and then doesn't. At the door, she crouches to Leo's eye level and makes her voice quieter than the room. I'll be here in the morning, she says, not asking for a nod because asking is another name for asking too much. She lets her hand rest an inch from his on the blanket where he can see it and move if he wants. He doesn't. That, too, is a kind of answer that adults must take without turning it into guilt. In the stairwell, the air is all damp cement and perfume that remembers the last visit. The net curtain across the courtyard twitches, late to its own game. Grace goes down the steps with the steady tread of someone who understands the difference between losing ground and planting a marker. Charlotte's visits learn the gaps in Daniel's day. She arrives when the emails thicken, when a delivery needs signing, when the estate gets loud enough to make a person grateful for any voice that sounds like family. She brings small brightnesses that behave like anchors' new cushions that don't match, a scented candle that insists on being noticed. Grace keeps her orbit steady. Leo tracks her and then doesn't. His hands hover at the lip of clapping and rest there as if waiting for weather to pass. On a Thursday, gray enough to make the kitchen light look tired, Leo has a pad on his tray. Grace has learned to let drawing arrive without announcement, the pen within reach. The page turned, nothing said about it. He makes marks that remember roads, a curve that could be a hill, a box that might be a car if the day allows it. Charlotte steps in with a voice like a cushion. Oh, we won't bother with that today, love. To Grace. Screens tire him. It's paper, Grace says, and turns the pad the right way up for Leo without looking at Charlotte. Charlotte's smile tightens one tooth's width. Best keep stimulation down, she murmurs, and later to Leo alone. Don't show people your drawings, darling. They get upset. Daddy gets upset. The pad shuts with a soft slap. Leo's hands disappear under the blanket as if the blanket is the one thing the world won't take. Grace steps out for 2 minutes to fetch the post from the hall table. When she returns, Charlotte is folding laundry that Grace hasn't unfolded yet. I popped a wash on, Charlotte says, brisk. Spotted your jumper in the basket, figured you'd want it fresh. She says the word "your" like a secret she is letting slip for Grace's benefit. Later that afternoon, Grace finds her bus stop already occupied. Charlotte stands there with a paper bag that claims to be dinner. You're a long way from home, Charlotte says pleasantly. Stratham, isn't it? Near your mum. Grace answers with the kind of smile you use when a stranger knows your birthday. South, she says, like most of London. Charlotte's nod is tidy. Good girl. Family's everything. In the kitchen, Charlotte speaks as if they are co-parents. She's lovely, she says of Grace, but I think she feeds her own need to be useful. It's not her fault. Some people confuse attachment with progress. Daniel rubs his eyes as if truth might be coaxed into focus. He did eat, he says, almost apologizing for the fact. Charlotte's hand finds his sleeve the way a seatbelt clicks. He also slept badly afterwards. He's fragile, Dan. We mustn't turn him into a performance. Grace sets a mug down without noise, which is harder than it looks. Small tries help him remember choices, she says. We stop when he asks. Charlotte's smile folds the comment into something harmless. Of course. We're all trying. The stairwell keeps the smell of damp like an old habit. Now it keeps Charlotte's perfume, too. Grace begins to register it before the knock light. Sweet, the sort that sits on fabric longer than the person who wore it. She catches the same note on the handle of Leo's chair, on the fleece blanket, on the hallway mirror frame. It could be nothing. It could be everything. When she re-inspects the tray, the spoon has migrated just out of reach. The cup's handle is turned away from Leo's good side. He struggles when things are too hard, Charlotte observes helpfully, and Grace adjusts both to the right distance without replying. Quiet window. Pad reopened when Charlotte slips out for a call. Leo draws a road that bends and a box that is now certainly a car. A circle sits above the dash. 2 stick figures crowd the front seats. A smaller circle marks the back. Leo shades a line that runs away from the road, heavy as if he knows the pressure of it. Charlotte returns before the line ends. No, darling, she says softly, placing a palm on the page, but not enough to be called force. Not helpful. She lifts her hand and the pencil mark ends under it like a sentence that has learned not to finish itself. To Grace, with a laugh that borrows authority. He obsesses. Best to redirect. Grace doesn't pry the pad back. She doesn't argue in a room where a boy is watching the way adults spend words. She sets the pencil where Leo can see it tomorrow and lets the loss sit between them like a stone that will be moved when the ground allows. Daniel's mobile buzzes with a number he doesn't recognize. Friend from church, Charlotte says before he's asked. Knows a pediatric specialist. I mentioned your situation purely out of concern. The call that follows produces an opinion that sounds official. Overstimulation, consistency. Don't let non-family form primary bonds. The line echoes enough to hide where it came from. Grace says nothing and writes nothing down. She has learned that in some houses, paper is both weapon and shield. Instead, she keeps count of Leo's breaths, while the adults decide who gets to own the word care. After lunch, Charlotte walks Grace to the door. On the mat, voices dip so Daniel won't have to be burdened by the practicalities women handle. Your mum must worry, Charlotte says. Her daughter on buses so late? Stretham's rough after dark. And your little brother Connor, is it? Needs his revision time quiet? You're good to keep it that way. Grace's spine knows the sentence before her head does. She keeps her face as unreadable as glass. See you in the morning, she says. Charlotte's mouth makes kind. Her eyes make terms. We all want what's best for Leo, she murmurs. Let's not confuse him. Grace descends the stairwell with a calm that is built, not felt. On the second landing, she stops and breathes to a count of 6, the way she teaches people to do when the room is shrinking. On the ground floor, the estate door opens to a smell of rain and chip fat. A fox watches her go with the bored politeness of London animals. That evening, Grace emails the agency her standard update, no rhetoric, just the day. Leo's attention at 5 count, 2 claps, appetite fair, new family involvement in care routine. She does not add the parts that read like suspicion until suspicion becomes proof. She writes a second note to herself on paper that will not be forwarded. Scent on blanket, spoon position, remarks about family, drawing discouraged. Then she sets both aside because tomorrow has to be about Leo and not about winning a conversation. "See you in the morning," she had said. She intends to keep the sentence true. Inside the flat, Daniel stands with his palm on the chair again, steadying a boat he is not sure he should launch. Leo's hands are quiet under the blanket. The kite does not move. The morning comes in thin and gray, the kind of light that makes rooms honest. Grace keeps the routine as if it were a string across a river. Same time, same tray, same small orbit that never asks before it shows. She does not mention drawing. She only lays a plain pad where Leo can see it, pencils squared, the soft stub of a rubber waiting, as if it has always belonged to the table. Leo's eyes land on the pad. Leave it. Come back. His fingers hover at the edge of doing, and then decide. The first line is a road that refuses to keep straight. It bends downwards with a weight he seems to remember in his wrist. Next, a box. The blunt outline of a car, door, and window sketched in hard, neat strokes. Inside the box, a circle where a steering wheel should be. In the back, a smaller circle that could be a child's head if anyone dared to name it. Grace says nothing that would make the page shy. She keeps the air unbusy and lets the tiny theater evaporate. From the doorway, Daniel watches with the kind of careful stillness that hopes not to matter. Leo keeps going. 2 ovals for faces in the front. Hair same length, same shape, graphite darkened and then darkened again, as if the likeness needs insurance. He presses harder when he draws their mouths. They are not smiling. One stick hand sits too close to the wheel, the other reaches from the passenger side and hooks over it. The line grows heavy where the road drops, as if gravity has signed the picture. "Leo," Daniel says only the name, because anything larger might scatter the pieces. He takes a step nearer without getting between boy and page. "That's good, mate." The pencil pauses. Leo breathes through his mouth, quick and careful, then adds a small mark on the back seat. A dot that could be an open mouth or a shout that never made it into sound. He looks not at Daniel, not at Grace, but at the line running away from the road and shades it until the paper shows a dent where thought has become pressure. Grace shifts by an inch so Leo doesn't have to choose between looking and listening. 2 in the front, she says, level and slow, making the words flat enough to land on without slipping. Same hair. Leo's pencil taps once on the passenger side hand. His eyes flick up and meet Grace's for the time it takes a heartbeat to pick itself up. He goes back to the wheel and makes the fingers clearer 5 little bars, gripping. Daniel's throat clicks. He has seen the photo on the sideboard 1,000 times. Charlotte and her sister shoulder to shoulder, same eyes, same mouth. The difference between them visible only to people who needed there to be one. He has opened that frame and dusted under it, told himself he was honoring what was lost and not keeping what wouldn't go. Now the pad on his table is saying the quiet part aloud. 2, Grace says again, as if counting passengers rather than ghosts. Front seats. She lets silence reach for the next truth so Leo doesn't have to drag it uphill on his own. Leo draws a thin, straight line across the steering wheel, the sort of mark children make when they want to show force without knowing how to show motion. He draws the road's edge darker, the slope meaner. He dots the back seat with tiny, slanted strokes that might be tears, might be rain on glass, might be both. His chest lifts and falls in a rhythm Grace recognizes from people trying not to remember and failing. Daniel sits on the arm of the sofa because his knees will not hold. "You were there," he says to the picture, not to the boy, because the picture can bear what a child shouldn't have to. His hand opens and closes against his thigh. He does not reach to touch Leo for fear of interrupting what is finally speaking. The knock is soft and certain, the kind that believes it belongs. Grace does not move. Daniel flinches like a man who has heard a shot in a film and cannot unhear it. The second knock is nearer to cheerful. Charlotte steps in on the third, coat already smiling off her shoulders. "I tried your mobile," she says, letting the apology sit where habit will stroke it. Then she sees the pad. Her face doesn't change, her breath does, for a fraction caught and tidied before it can be seen. "Drawing," she says lightly, as if the word were a small dog that needs praise to behave. "We don't want to wind him up, do we?" Leo's pencil stills above the wheel. His eyes skitter to the door, to the window, to Grace, and then away. His hands fold themselves into the blanket with a care that looks like fear wearing politeness. "It's paper," Grace answers, the way she did last time, but quieter, so Leo won't think the room is choosing teams. She slides the cup a finger's width towards his good hand and leaves the rest of the air alone. Charlotte's smile turns warmer, which is not the same as kind. "He obsesses," she explains to Daniel, as if reciting a helpful leaflet. "Pictures make it worse. We agreed calm, didn't we?" She comes to the table and places her fingertips on the edge of the pad. Not enough to be called taking. Enough to be understood. "Let him finish," Daniel says, too fast, as if the sentence surprised him by existing. His eyes stay on the drawing as though it might run if he looks away. "Please." Charlotte lifts her hands. She tilts her head the exact degree required to suggest she is yielding for their sakes. "Of course," she says softly, "if that's what you want." To Leo, she adds a little laugh. "Silly car, All a muddle. We don't need to think about that day." Leo's pencil becomes clumsy in his grip. He makes one last mark, a short, hard line at the joining of two hands on the wheel, and then he sets the pencil down because setting it down is how you stop being in trouble. Charlotte folds herself into the chair nearest Leo with practiced care. "Tell you what," she says, brightening the shade of her voice. "I've brought biscuits. We can have one and rest." She sets a tin on the table that already has too many items on it. The lid sighs as it opens. "Chocolate digestives. Your favorite, Dan." Daniel doesn't move. He is looking at the drawn slope like a man who knows the angle is wrong and can't bear to say why. Grace counts Leo's breaths 4 in, 6 out, and keeps the picture exactly where it is, exactly where his eye can find it again if he is allowed to want it. Charlotte closes the pad with 2 fingers and a smile. "We'll tuck that away for later," she says, and would make it sound like care, even if it were a lock clicking. The rubber thuds softly on the cover as if asked to stay, too. "No more fuss." Leo retracts into the blanket as if paper were a tide that has learned obedience. The room forgets the shape it had a moment ago. Grace puts the pencil back on top of the pad so it will be visible tomorrow. It is not defiance. It is planting a flag no one can call a weapon. Daniel scrapes a chair back and stands up as if the floor has changed rules. He wears the expression of someone who has put 2 facts together and is deciding whether to admit it. "Tea?" he says to the air, the word everyone uses when they need to live for 30 seconds while a decision stops shaking. Charlotte beams, victory wrapped in manners. "Lovely," she says, and reaches for the tin. "One for the artist," she adds, too late. Too sweet, and Leo doesn't take it. Grace tidies around the edges of the drawing without moving the page itself. She dabs the tray where a drop of water has made the paper want to curl. She wipes without wiping away. "We'll keep this safe," she says to no one in particular, which is the only way to say it without starting a fight. Daniel looks at her and finds a sentence he can tolerate. "We should keep it," he says, and hears his own voice come back steadier. "For his review." The word review feels clumsy in his mouth, like a tool borrowed from the wrong trade, but it is something he can lift. Charlotte's smile does not reach her eyes. "If you think it helps," she answers, comfortingly neutral, making help sound like a thing that might break if handled by people who aren't careful. Grace slides the pad to the sideboard and sets it flat, out of reach of tidiness, in reach of tomorrow. She knows what she saw. She knows what Leo said without words. She will not sell the moment to a quarrel. She will not let it be tidied into nothing either. Leo's hands reappear by degrees, as if surfacing. His gaze moves from the sideboard to the window where the kite hangs, stubborn and bent. He doesn't clap. He doesn't speak. But his eyes hold, fixed on the place where the picture now rests, and do not let go. By the time October light has thinned to a pale ribbon, Charlotte knows the timetable better than the clock. She comes with a smile that opens doors, a bag that rustles like good intentions, and a voice that says, "Let me." On the hall table she sets flowers that smell like Sundays. In the kitchen, a tin appears with a note in her handwriting, for later, if he fancies a treat. Daniel tries to be gracious because gratitude is easier than admitting you don't know what's happening in your own house. Grace rinses a cloth and watches the way perfume lingers on objects that didn't ask to be part of a scent. Leo follows the orbit. He can trust the slow circle on the tray, the steady positions, the voice that leaves space, but his hands stay near the blanket now, learning smallness like homework. The threats don't call themselves threats. They arrive as facts, Charlotte seems to know. "Your buses are late on the South Circular, aren't they?" she says to Grace, casual as weather. Connor must need quiet for his A-levels. Grace keeps her face like glass. "Most boys do," she says. Charlotte's smile warms. "And your mom still at the pharmacy? Brave of her with those hours." The information hangs between them as if it had nowhere else to be. To Daniel, Charlotte's tone is all practical mercy. "We should take weight off Grace when we can," she suggests. "Give her a breather. She looks done in. I can handle drinks, meds, the little bits." It sounds like help. It is also a hand on a steering wheel that isn't hers. On a late afternoon that already smells like evening, Charlotte moves about the kitchen as if the cupboards had told her where they prefer to be opened. "Cocoa?" she calls over her shoulder, bright and ordinary. "Good before bed." "Not too sweet," Daniel says, grateful to be offered a job he recognizes. He lingers in the doorway while Grace wipes the tray and keeps Leo in the small weather he knows. Steam collars the mugs. Chocolate breathes up like a memory from easier years. Charlotte speaks over it all without raising her voice. "You've been such a help, Grace," she says. "Honestly, don't know how Dan managed before." Grace nods, the shape of thanks without the need to trust it. When Daniel steps out to fetch a parcel he has been told is at the gate, the kitchen changes key by half a note. Charlotte's shoulder tilts, sheltering the mugs as if from a draft. From her pocket comes a small paper twist the color of nothing. It opens in the shadow of her hand. A fine white falls too neat to be sugar, too slow to be steam making a pale ring where it lands. Grace does not gasp. She has trained for the kind of work that asks your face to be a closed book while your mind writes margin notes. She wipes a circle on the tray so Leo can see her moving, which gives her the distance she needs to see Charlotte's moving. The ring dissolves, the spoon goes round once, twice. The air returns to smelling like childhood. Grace steps to the sink with one mug as if to fetch a napkin. She sets it down. In the same motion she brings the other up, turning handles so a left hand will take the cup meant for a right. She does it slowly enough to look like nothing. She does it surely enough to be everything. Charlotte is already carrying the second mug to Leo. "For Daddy," she says brightly to the boy, then corrects herself without missing the beat of a smile. "For later, I mean. Warm now, though." "Lovely." Grace returns with her mug, now the harmless one, and lets it kiss her lower lip without drinking. Daniel's footsteps sound in the hall with a parcel that never existed. Charlotte doesn't even flinch. "Perfect timing," she sings. "Cocoa on." Grace takes one mouthful she does not swallow. She lets the liquid pool in her cheek, where taste can tell the truth. The bitterness is wrong flat. Not chocolate wrong, but medicine wrong. The ghost of a smell she once knew on a ward where a nurse had misread a line. She lets the mouthful fall back into the mug with a tiny click of china, a sound a house makes 100 times a day and therefore not at all. Then she lets go of the counter. There is a way to hit the floor that advertises drama and a way to go down that asks for silence. Grace chooses the second. Her knees fold, her shoulder takes the slip, her breath shortens but does not stutter. In 4, out 6, the drill she teaches people who think they are drowning on land. Her eyelids lower to a thin gray where the room can still be red. The mug rolls, stops against the kickboard. The world considers the shape it will take next. "Grace?" Daniel's voice bounces off tile and tightens. He moves to lift her head, then hesitates, terrified of doing it wrong. Habit makes him say her name twice the way you do in emergencies, as if the second syllable could push the first into being useful. Charlotte's voice arrives smoothed, quick with solutions. "She's a fainter," she says, like she's seen 7 of them and they all use the same trick. "I'll call someone." She doesn't. She crouches by Leo instead, close enough that he can smell perfume he did not consent to learn. "It's all right, darling," she murmurs. "Things happen. People who don't know their limits make things messy." Grace's lashes don't move. Her hearing sharpens the way the body sometimes does to earn its keep. Through the slow blood thud in her ears, she counts the seconds Charlotte keeps the mug near Leo and the one she keeps near her own smile. Charlotte leans in, voice lowered to a thread meant only for a boy who has been taught that words can hurt people he loves. "He should have been quiet," she says. "She should have known better. We all would have been fine." The pronouns perform their trick everybody and nobody at once. Then the mask slips half a finger's width. If she had stayed out of it, Daniel's "what" is raw, unshaped. He has heard something without knowing what his ear has caught. Charlotte's mouth turns sunny before he can choose a fight. "If she'd stayed for a biscuit," I was saying. She laughs small. "You know how carers are always rushing, bless them." She slides Leo's mug out of the line of his reach while she is being charming. "We don't want spills." On the floor, Grace lets one finger twitch against the tile, the agreed signal she used to teach to families who needed to know the difference between faint and danger. "I hear you. I am here." She opens her eyes to slits and makes her breath longer, like a person returning from a faraway place rather than a woman cataloging the contents of a cup. "Sit," Daniel tells Grace, trying to be calm with a voice that doesn't like the work. He gets a cushion under her head. His hand shakes. He notices the shake and hates it. Charlotte takes the kettle off, though it is already off, a gesture that looks like help from a distance. "Bit of a shock," Charlotte says. "We should keep things very quiet now." Grace nods, grateful very quietly. She puts a palm on the floor and lets the room rise towards her. The cocoa sits where it was set, a ring of brown drying on the rim of one mug and not on the other. She thinks of the small paper twist that had the color of nothing. She thinks of the way fear teaches boys not to speak. Leo's eyes are hot with trying not to cry. He looks at Grace, then at Daniel, then at the drawing on the sideboard, as if it were a door a person could walk through if only the handle weren't so high. Grace finds his gaze and shakes her head once. Not no, but wait. The word is a plank laid over a gap. No accusations, no sirens, no big scenes to feed on. The house holds the tension like a breath and refuses to cough. Daniel makes tea because people in Britain do that when there is nothing else to do that could look like love. Charlotte takes charge of nothing in particular, which adds up to a lot. Grace takes the chair by Leo and gives him back the only thing that has worked since the beginning: steadiness. "Tomorrow," she says quietly, as if planning something as ordinary as a shopping list. "We'll try again tomorrow." She leaves the pad on the sideboard where the drawing can keep thinking. She leaves the mugs exactly where a person with doubts could find them again if he ever learns to name them. At the door, Charlotte's goodbye is all warmth. "Rest," she tells Grace, fingers light on Grace's arm, a touch that practices being sisterly. "We wouldn't want episodes." The pause has a polished edge. Grace goes down the stairwell like a woman who has just crossed a river and knows she will have to cross it again. On the second step, she stops and breathes a count of 6 until her hands agree to be hands. Tomorrow has to hold. Morning comes in flat and gray. Grace keeps the ritual small, the tray wiped in a slow circle, the chair angled so Leo can see her coming, the space between movements left wide enough for a boy to breathe. Daniel tries to be ordinary and fails. He keeps glancing at the sideboard where the drawing lies like a sentence that hasn't finished yet. Charlotte arrives with a measured knock, her coat already halfway to its hook. "Quiet day," she says cheerfully, as if calm were something you can pour like milk. She is sweetness and rules in one breath. Grace notes the mug Charlotte places near the kettle and the way Daniel steps aside for it. She doesn't touch cups today. She touches Leo's eyeline instead. "Hello," she says, the way you say hello to someone who is walking back from far away. His hands hover over the blanket and settle, not hiding, waiting. Charlotte crouches into Leo's space with a smile that knows its lines. "We won't have fuss, will we?" she whispers, like a secret she is kind enough to share. To Daniel, she tilts her head. "He's been tense since all the activities. Boundaries, remember?" Her palm smooths the blanket that has already been smoothed. She turns the chair a sliver enough to angle Leo away from the table where the drawing would be in view. Grace takes one quiet step so she's back in his sight. "If you want," she says to Leo, "we can tell the Daisy story without any voices, just the parts you like." Charlotte's laugh is light. "Stories tire him." The sentence lands where fear likes to sit. Daniel's shoulders hitch, his face caught between two kinds of love. He looks at Leo, then at the drawing, and does not move the chair back. Grace lays the pad on the tray without opening it. She isn't asking. She is setting something down that belongs to him. Leo's gaze falls to the closed cover as if it were a door he has wanted to touch, but not dared to. His fingers lift. They don't quite reach. Charlotte's hand appears, quick and soft. "No pictures today," she coos, and slides the pad a palm's width away. Then closer to Daniel, brighter. "Shall we keep it calm, Dan?" The word becomes a lid. The room shrinks under it. Leo's chest stutters. Grace holds her breath with him for a count of 4 and lets it go for 6. She doesn't say breathe, she just does it until he copies. Charlotte leans in again, lower now, voice a thread meant for a boy taught to keep people safe by keeping quiet. "Good lad," she murmurs. "We don't talk about that day. We don't upset Daddy. People leave when boys say the wrong things." The pencil of silence snaps. Leo's hand shoots out not to the pad, not to the blanket, to the air between Charlotte's wrist and the tray, as if pushing back a shadow. His mouth opens with the awkwardness of something unused and still true. "No." The word is thin and new and enormous. "Don't." He gulps, finds the rest. "Don't hurt." The room freezes the way ponds do when a hard frost chooses speed. Daniel's hand drops from the kettle. Grace does not move. She lets the air hold. Leo's eyes fix on Charlotte's, then on the drawing on the sideboard, then back again as if joining dots. His voice works like a hinge that has wanted to turn for 2 years. 2. In front, he says, breathy but clear. "Same hair." He taps the tray where a wheel would be. "Hands, both, pull." The last word lands heavy, pulled down by the weight of the slope in his picture. "Mum. Cried. Car. Down." His face crumples and steadies. She pulled. The sentence is jagged. The truth is not. Charlotte laughs too bright, too fast. He's confused, she says to Daniel, already building a cushion for him to fall on. He mixes films and... Stop, Daniel says, and the word is one he has not heard himself use like that in years. He looks at Leo as if the world has decided to speak through the only mouth that could make him listen. He looks at Charlotte and his face changes. Grace keeps still. She has learned that some moments drown if you touch them. Charlotte's eyes flash and smooth over. You know what trauma does to memory? She tries, medical without a qualification. He's been overstimulated. We said boundaries. Leo hits the tray with his palm once, a small, flat thunder. You, he says to her, voice shredded and sure. Pulled. He lifts his hand and tugs at the air like a child showing the motion no one let him say. Something tightens in Charlotte's mouth. Careful, Leo, she warns, kindness varnished on, the grain still visible. We don't accuse people. We don't... You were there, Daniel says, quieter than shouting. Passenger seat. His eyes won't leave hers. You were there. Charlotte's next smile is the wrong one, the one that shows and steals at the same time. If she hadn't panicked, she starts and stops and hears the room understand the peace she has just given away. Daniel steps between Charlotte and the chair, not big, just certain. His palm is flat, asking for space she does not own. Out, he says, voice level, jaw trembling with the effort not to break it. Now. You can't. Out. Charlotte gathers her coat without hurry, because dignity is the last thing some people will drop. At the door, she throws the softest kind of grenade. You'll frighten him, Dan, she says. You always do when you don't think. Then she is gone, perfume staying a second longer than her shoes. Daniel stands very still. He looks like a man working out which part of his house is load-bearing. He picks up his phone and dials. His voice is careful with the person on the line. He doesn't say more than he can prove. He says enough. Grace kneels so she and Leo are level. You did hard work, she tells him, not praising, not pushing. You said the thing. That's enough for now. She puts the pad back on the tray and opens it to the drawing, not asking him to add, not asking him to look, only making it possible. The flat rearranges itself around the truth. Tea cools in a mug no one remembers making. Outside, a double-decker breathes past the estate as if nothing has changed, which is how London carries on. Daniel sits on the sofa arm because he can't yet trust chairs. I didn't see, he says, the confession of a man who has finally let go of the rope that was burning his hands. I didn't see. You're seeing now, Grace says. It is not comfort. It is a statement that lets a new floor take weight. Leo's hands rest on the line of his knees, small, open, not hiding. His mouth works, tired and brave. He doesn't have more words yet. He doesn't need to. The room has heard him. The knock, when it comes, is official, steady, courteous, practiced at bad news and good. Daniel answers with a face that has learned something about being a father in the last 10 minutes that 2 years of surviving did not teach him. He speaks to the uniforms quietly, gives names, and the sentence he is ready to stand inside. He passes the drawing over in hands that shake only after he lets go. Grace stays with Leo in the sitting room. She does not tell him he was brave. She keeps the air slow and safe and ordinary because ordinary is what people earn after extraordinary hurts them. We'll try lunch soon, she says eventually, like any other day. Butterflies might fancy a visit. He nods. Not big. Enough. A year turns without asking permission. Bromley does its usual weather-soft rain in the morning, a bright hour that feels borrowed in the afternoon. The flat looks like people live in it on purpose now. The laminated notes are gone. In their place, a school timetable sits under a magnet that finally holds. A speech and language leaflet is folded neatly, not like a life raft, but like a map someone has actually used. Leo's chair is still his chair, but it no longer looks like a punishment. He sits straighter. When he laughs, it arrives easily, not like a miracle spooked by noise. He says words you can hear from the hallway: toast, music, park, and strings them together when he is not thinking about stringing. He still tires, still needs time to find edges, but his mouth and his breath are friends now. Daniel has learned the new pace of fathering slow is not failure. Quiet is not nothing. He knows which battles are stairs and which are hills. He has a way of looking at his son that says, I am here for the bit between the beginning and the end, not just the headlines. Grace moves through the morning like someone who knows where everything belongs because she decided with the boy, not for him. In the kitchen, there is a biscuit tin nobody argues with. A kite, new but cut to the same shape as the old one, waits by the door with a thin patience that makes Daniel smile. The sitting room has learned a different acoustics. Furniture is arranged for passing and pausing rather than parking. The table still hosts sandwiches in butterfly shapes now and then, less as a coaxing trick, more as a private joke the house enjoys. Leo takes one without thinking, bites, talks with a crumb at the corner of his mouth because he knows someone will pass a napkin without turning it into a ceremony. Ready? Grace asks him, holding the kite by its cross with the respect reserved for older things. Park, Leo answers, the word bright, landing sure. Park, Daniel echoes, and the echo is not a correction but a chorus. On their way out, Leo stops by the sideboard where a drawing lies in a plain frame. He doesn't touch it every time. He does today, one finger on the glass, quick, like a salute you don't need to see to know it was good. Then he nods at the door in a way that means forward. The park keeps its own clock dogs in the morning, prams at 11, school kids after 3. Today there's wind the right kind, not cruel, not lazy. Daniel checks the line like he's checking a seatbelt. Grace runs a little because running with a kite is the kind of running adults are allowed to do without looking like they've forgotten how to be serious. Leo holds the handle with Daniel's hand soft over his, the way you show someone control without taking it. The kite lifts like it remembers and is relieved to be asked. Up past the stubborn trees, up against a sky that has made space for it. Higher, Leo says, and the word is not a plea but a plan. They let it climb. When the line sings, he laughs a proper laugh that doesn't ask permission. They stand together with their heads tipped back, 3 shadows lengthening into the grass. A boy in a chair that no longer owns him. A father who has put down the weight that kept his eyes on the ground. A woman whose steadiness shows up in the way the string never tangles. Later, back at the flat, there is cake that looks shop-bought in the best possible way. Leo insists on mining the icing for the letter he likes most, O, then carefully sticks it back on because he understands about keeping a circle whole. Daniel clears his throat twice and tries a sentence that has been rehearsed nowhere except his own chest. Grace, he says, and her name in his mouth sounds less like help and more like home. Would you stay? As family, I mean. Officially, if you wanted. He opens his hand the way nervous people do when they don't want to make a fist by accident. A small ring sits there, simple, honest, the kind that will look right on a day when nobody is taking photos. Grace doesn't make an occasion of it. She looks at Leo first. He grins the open grin he saves for things that make immediate sense. Stay, he says, and knocks the table with his knuckles once, his new way of clapping when he's holding something important. Yes, Grace answers. Not a speech, not a performance. A word like a door opening. Daniel laughs into his hands because some joys are too full face for daylight. When he lifts his head, there's a shine he's not ashamed of. They stand there a bit awkwardly, like people learning a new room, and then they are in it. All 3. On a Sunday when the light minds its manners, they go to the cemetery. It is not far. It has always been far. Daniel carries flowers because he doesn't trust his hands to be empty. Grace pushes the chair without turning this into a ritual about strength. Leo watches the pathway for edges. At the right place, he gestures small for the break. The stone is kept simple, the way she would have liked. Someone has tidied Charlotte's name is not here and will not be here. Absence can be a kind of peace. The grass is short. A robin does the work of robins, which is to make meaning for people without trying. Daniel starts a sentence and shelves it. Grace steps back the way carers know to step back when the conversation isn't theirs. And yet, she does not leave. Leo sits quietly with his hands on his knees, then looks up as if he has decided where words should go. "Mom," he says. The word is rounder now. It does not wobble. "We're okay." He breathes, tries again, adding weight where it belongs. "We're okay." He looks at Daniel, then at Grace, then at the stone. "Promise." There are tears because people are made of water and the body insists. They do not apologize for them. Grace takes a small step forward and places the kite folded neat against the base of the stone for a minute, just to let the day hold all its symbols in one place. Then she takes it back because living is a job that requires equipment. On the way back, London does London sirens to somewhere else. A delivery bike arguing with a pothole, a child on a scooter making danger look like practice. At the flat, Leo asks for music without pictures, and Grace puts on the kind that leaves space for people to think their own thoughts. Daniel opens the window. The curtain lifts and settles. The new kite hangs where the old one used to sag. Its cross is straight. Its color remembers red without having to work at it. They eat. They talk in small sentences that don't try to be poems. Leo finds a joke in the butter and tells it badly and beautifully. Grace laughs first because she understands the shape he was reaching for. Daniel laughs after because laughter is a thing you can learn to meet on time. When evening comes, the lights in their windows look like a plan rather than a habit. The house no longer waits for a miracle. It practices keeping one. Later, after Leo has drifted, Daniel stands in the doorway and watches Grace tidy in the way you do when there is nothing to tidy that matters. "Thank you," he says, "for the day, for the year, for the refusal to be spectacular when steady would do." "It was all him," Grace answers, and means it. "We just kept the bridge open." On the sideboard, the drawing stays where they decided it should. Not a wound to be reopened, not a trophy to wave, but a true thing the house knows how to carry. Next to it, a small frame holds a photo taken in the park, 3 shadows long on the grass. A kite insisting on height, a line you can't see but can feel in the way the picture lifts. Outside, Bromley's late bus huffs its last few stops. Inside, the room is simple and full. No one is counting seconds anymore. When Leo wakes in the night to sip water, he points towards the window and says, half asleep, a word that used to belong to sorrow and now belongs to air. Sky. When the day thins to a good kind of quiet, the flat holds what it has learned, that progress is often a small hand finding the line of a string, that love is steadiness with a long memory, that voices return when rooms grow safe. Leo's chair is still a chair, not a sentence. Daniel has put down the weight that kept his eyes to the floor. Grace moves like a promise kept. The old drawing stays where they agreed it should true, not triumphant, and the new kite waits by the window, certain of wind. If any part of this found you, if you recognized the slow courage or the way an ordinary afternoon can change a house, leave a line below. Tell us which moment stayed, a picture, a sentence, or a silence. Your words might be the bridge someone else needs tonight. And if this kind of story belongs with you, stay with us. Subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter we're making set here, under this same sky where small acts become turning points and ordinary people learn how to carry the light they've earned.